Welcome to Atlanta News First Investigates. Behind the investigation. Did I get that right, Sierra? Because we're going to talk about one of your investigations today and everything behind the scenes.
Yeah, you got it right.
So tell us about this investigation, because I always tell people when it comes to ambulances, I talk about it from the consumer perspective in that the bills.
Yes.
Because you get a surprise bill from any ambulance company that you use, and it's going to be like $1,600. And I always tell people, if you're not dying, take an Uber. But there's another side to this story involving the actual ambulance service itself, involving delays.
Yeah,
and I think it's an important story. So sorry, I was talking over you.
The point that you're making, though, imagine still having to be on the hook for that bill if the ambulance shows up really late or it never comes at all. And this is kind of at the heart of the story. We've been working on a series about DeKalb County's EMS services. Some people may know the city of Brookhaven has been, for about the last 6 months, been trying to be in charge of their own ambulance services. And right now, because of legal zoning issues, our state law, they can't run their own ambulance services. DeKalb County is in charge of EMS for all of its cities, including Brookhaven. Brookhaven has been saying, hey, for so long, we've been struggling to get ambulances to respond to our emergency 911 calls that we want to do this thing ourselves. We want to fire y'all, get our own ambulance company, and we're asking the state for permission to do that, asking the state to give us license. So for the last 6 months, we have been profiling cases where it seems like the EMS delays are greater than average times across the metro, and in some cases really long times, to the point that someone feels that they've got to call someone else to drive them to the hospital. It's exactly what happened in this case, where we interviewed a Brookhaven resident who had been suffering. They're waiting on an ambulance. She hears paramedics shortly before she goes unconscious. The fire department responded to help her in the emergency situation, and she hears them shortly before going unconscious saying, there aren't any ambulances. So she gets her friend involved. Her friend takes her to the hospital. And so this is the story of Diane Ertlejack and a message she has for our viewers.
Let's go ahead and take a look.
And I remember just so desperate to get to the hospital. And I think I even said, please don't let me die.
It was a year ago, but Diane Ertlejack remembers it like it was a day ago.
I'm 69.
You said 69?
Hurry.
Okay, yes,
69.
I'm trying to start the ambulance. We have questions we have to ask.
July 2023, Diane felt pressure in her head, confusion, nausea, and serious bleeding. She had her friend call 911.
So I'm sending the paramedics there now.
Paramedics did come to her Brookhaven home. It was a DeKalb Fire Department crew on their fire truck. They responded within 8 minutes to provide first aid and check for injuries. As a former nurse of 2 decades, Diane felt she knew she needed to be in a hospital, adamant about being taken there. She thought crews were waiting on the ambulance, but there was no ambulance to wait on in the first place.
I was kind of going in and out of it. All I remember hearing is there is no ambulance to send.
When you heard there is no ambulance to send, what went through your mind?
I can't believe I just heard that.
DeKalb County records show a dispatcher noted can't send resource and resource not available, advanced transport. A county spokesperson confirms there was no ambulance available at that time, but argued it's only a snapshot of a day in which 23 ambulances were in the system responding to other calls. Instead of the county EMS provider, American Medical Response, or AMR, taking her, Diane's friend drove her to the ER.
After that, I woke up in ICU.
What was the actual diagnosis?
I was diagnosed with water intoxication.
According to the National Institutes of Health, that's when sodium levels drop too low and water intake is too high, causing the brain to swell. Diane learned a previous medication played a role in her low sodium levels.
Now that I look back, I'm appalled. Where are the ambulances? I don't know the logistics of why they're not around or why there wasn't one for the day I needed it.
Brookhaven City Manager
This is just unacceptable.
Christian Sigmund.
The industry term for that is a NAT, which is an acronym for No Available Transport. And that's just literally when nothing's available.
He claims retired firefighters informed him these NAT declarations are are common in DeKalb, but there's no data to back up that claim. Atlanta News First Investigates found the county does not track it.
We don't know the magnitude or frequency. The county needs to answer that question. How prevalent is a gnat call and when is it?
DeKalb commissioners, DeKalb CEO, and AMR did not agree to an on-camera interview with Atlanta News First Investigates about the delays in EMS services. However, along with EMS staff shortages and excessive non-emergency 911 calls, the county blames wall time. Wall time, known as the time paramedics wait at hospital ERs or hospital parking lots until hospital staff are ready to accept the patient handoff. For instance, for the last 3 years, Grady's hospital wall time was roughly 21 minutes. While Piedmont and Emory did not provide data, a DeKalb County spokesperson argues the average wall time across the metro is 55 minutes. Despite those factors, Sigmund maintains the delays boil down to years-long leadership issues.
DeKalb County leadership could make this a priority and say this is, our most basic service. We want to make sure it's done right and then hold AMR's feet to the fire. That's the first part of the management leadership issue, but we're demanding either they figure it out or let us provide the service.
As for neighbors, like Diane,
I'm a little leery. I think the next time somebody told me, well, call Uber first, you'll get better response.
Well, now I'm thinking if I have an emergency that I should call Uber.
Twofold argument here. You want to feel like you're in control, right? And so Diane's saying, if I can just pick up my phone, use the app, and get someone to help me immediately, that seems like the solid choice. But we want to caution the viewer. We know Uber and Lyft drivers or any rideshare driver, their car is not properly equipped to handle emergencies, no life-saving measures as an ambulance would be. And because you're paying your taxes for the county, the city, it's fair to expect that when you call 911, someone is going to show up and potentially transfer you to the local hospital. Obviously, it didn't happen in her case. We talked to the ambulance provider that's in charge of EMS services for all of DeKalb County, AMR, and they say they're committed to Brookhaven and DeKalb County as a whole, and they're working on solutions. But obviously, you saw in that story, they didn't do an interview with us. It's really a frustrating thing. As it stands right now, the state has not decided what they're going to do with Brookhaven, if they're going to approve that license to allow them to run their own EMS zone. But it's definitely an unfortunate situation to be in. I want to bring up something else we found out in that story. Diane's case was not just an anomaly. We told you that right before her passing out, she said she heard fire department paramedics say there is no ambulance to send. There's no ambulance to help. We did some further research through open records requests, and it turns out that there is a declaration that the county will call sometimes when there aren't ambulances available, and that declaration is NAT. It's an acronym, and it stands for No Available Transport. The county's argument in all of this is that day they had more than 20 ambulances. It's just that those ambulances were on other busy calls and waiting on the wall, which, Harry, you know a little bit about because we've been talking about wall time today.
And that's a whole other investigation. I mean, who knew that you would have a situation where ambulances are there at the hospital and they're not able to go out, I guess, because there aren't.
It's hanging on the wall. That's what they call it. Yeah.
Well, there's nobody there to intake the patient.
Yes, and that was something I learned through this investigation. Wall time is a common terminology used within the EMS and paramedic industry, not just in Metro Atlanta, but across the country. And as we mentioned in that story, that's that patient offload time. Sometimes paramedics are transporting the patient to the hospital, but they can't actually bring the patient into the hospital room. They've got to wait on the so-called wall. So that wall could either be the parking lot, the actual hallways in the ER rooms. They can't actually give the patient to the ER staff to place them in a room. And then just like you mentioned, it's that trickle-down effect. So if they're waiting on the wall, then those crews can't go to another medical emergency. They can't use that ambulance to go to another 911 call, and residents end up similar to Diane Ertlejack, where there was no ambulance to send.
I want to go real quick back to the Uber thing, because I meant to say ride share
Yeah,
in
ride share,
general.
yeah.
Right, Uber or Lyft.
We love
but-
Uber and Lyft, but rideshare in general, yeah.
And you also have to consider the fact that, they may not want to take you. The driver
Oh,
may,
yeah.
I mean, you're having an emergency. The first thing they may say is, hey, call an ambulance. And you're like, I did.
Yeah,
So,
we don't know what kind of insurance. We assume that our rideshare drivers have a lot of insurance, enough to be able to be a rideshare driver for a certain company. But I don't know that it goes like far enough that if something happens in the backseat of their car, that they're able to really cover you and help you with your bill. So we definitely have to be cautious with encouraging people to use rideshare.
right, definitely don't want to do that. I would think that if I have a family member there and I'm only 5 or 10 minutes
Yeah.
away from the hospital.
You might wanna show
and-
up, yeah.
And the ambulance is not coming, go.
Yeah.
All right, Sierra, thank you again so much. Sierra is my desk mate. And and here's the thing, I always learn so much from her. I mean, I'm the consumer guy, but when it's learning about statistics and research and stuff like this, we all kind of learn from each other.
We really do.
And it's helpful. So we hope you enjoyed this. This is Atlanta News First. Investigates behind the investigation. Better Call Harry with Sierra Cummings. And yeah, goodbye. See you soon.